Hope your work week is off to a good start. You're watching the Daily Report for Monday, October 25th here in Korea. A growing number of people, especially those in their 20s, are choosing to live alone. And in today's panel discussion, we explore this demographic reality and more. We start now with the pandemic updates. I have Kwon-soa standing by. So as always, let's start with the local coverage then.
All right, let's do that, Sunny. So we're kicking off the new work week with a little under 1,200 COVID-19 infections. That's 1,190 as of 12 a.m. and that represents the numbers that were counted on Sunday. It includes 1,167 domestic transmissions and 23 cases from abroad. Now, we are seeing a decline from 1,500 and 1,400 cases roughly from the weekend. But if we compare today's figure to last Monday, we are actually seeing a slight increase in Monday's figure. But if we go over to our next graph, overall in the past month or so, we are seeing a gradual decline in daily COVID-19 infections. And with that, the number of average domestic transmissions in the past week stands at 1,357. Now, by region, we're seeing still triple digits in the capital region, in Seoul and Gyeonggi-do province, both in the 400s, a little under 100 in Incheon. It's also good to see that a number of places are now seeing single-digit figures in daily transmissions. Korea now so far has accumulated 353,089 infections with a death toll at 2,773. Now, over the weekend, we have reached a milestone in the number of people who got 2 doses or are fully vaccinated, standing at 70.1% as of 12 a.m. We will have more details on that in a bit. But first, let's take a look at the global figures as well. Over 318,000 new infections were reported in the past 24 hours as of noon Korea time, with a little over 4,370 fatalities. Moving on, despite the weekend factor, way over 30,000 new cases were reported in the UK and Russia. And also there's been a resurgence in the Ukraine with more than 20,000 new cases. With that, the Ukraine has surpassed the total number of cases in the Philippines. And those are the general updates I have for now, but I'll see you back in a bit. Sunny?
All right, so thank you for now. Right, back on the local front, the daily tally has been retreating, as Hoa has mentioned, as authorities here prepare to transition into new normal come next month. For more on these preparations, I have Choi Min-jung here in the studio. Min-jung, good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Right, so let's begin with the President's remarks on efforts to contain the pandemic and on those to move beyond it.
Right, so President Moon said the country will be returning life back to pre-pandemic levels as more than 70% of the population have been fully vaccinated. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
안정적인 방역과 높은 백신 접종률을 바탕으로 우리는 이제 단계적 일상 회복을 시작합니다. 11월부터 본격 시행하게 될 것입니다. 국민의 평범한 일상이 회복되고 위축되었던 국민의 삶에 활력을 되찾을 것입니다.
Moon said that the country will be easing restrictions on businesses but still maintain some of its basic prevention rules, such as the wearing of masks. The president said he hopes Korea can be a benchmark for the world to follow by creating a successful exit strategy model.
Right. And Min-jung, what has been disclosed thus far about the easing of restrictions as we shift to the new normal?
Well, nothing has been finalized yet, but the government is holding a public hearing on this Monday regarding its transition plan. They are set to unveil a general blueprint, and more details will be made public soon. And the final plan will be announced on Friday, and the measures will likely take effect from November 1st. What is likely to change is the operating hours for restaurants and cafes that many watchers believe will be completely lifted. And also in line with the transition, the government plans to allow the use of discount vouchers for restaurants, sporting events, travel and cultural activities as well. Authorities have also announced that public transportation will now run according to their normal schedules. So starting Monday, most subway lines and buses in Seoul will operate at normal hours. Since the start of the pandemic, the fourth wave, public transit have been running at 20% reduced capacity after 10 p.m.
Right. Meanwhile, on the vaccination front, Min-jung, as our colleague Soa mentioned earlier, we hit a milestone this past weekend. Tell us more.
Right, so Korea has now vaccinated over 70% of its population, and this threshold was reached on Saturday. This milestone is significant as it was a requirement for our gradual return to normal. Although Korea was a comparative late starter in rolling out vaccines, it took the country just 8 months to reach this plateau. Korea nearly matched or even outpaced the vaccination rate of other major countries that started their respective vaccine rollouts much earlier than Korea. Health authorities are expecting 75% of the population to have been fully vaccinated by the end of this month.
Right, 75% of the population by the end of this month. That is good to know. All right, Minjung, thank you for now, but stay with us for the extended talk.
Okay.
Right, now moving beyond national borders, we take a closer look at the COVID-19 related events elsewhere, and I have Sua back at the desk with details on that. Sua.
Hi again, Sunny.
Right, then let's start in neighbouring China, Sua, where authorities are on high alert as there has been a spike in transmissions just months ahead of the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing.
Right, Sunny, just around 3 months left. And, you know, when it comes to coronavirus cases, anything can happen in such a period, as we also saw how infections have been hiking around the Tokyo Summer Olympics earlier this year. So in line with China's zero-tolerance COVID-19 policy, the Wuhan Marathon, which was to be run by some 26,000 people on Sunday, has been cancelled last minute, and that to prevent risks of transmissions, according to organizers. And Wuhan, of course, the city in Hubei province, that was the very place where COVID-19 was first discovered. Fresh coronavirus outbreaks in China are raising alarm ahead of a much bigger sporting event, the Olympics, as new cases have been confirmed in at least 11 provinces within 1 week. Chinese authorities say that recent sources of infections are linked to tourism activities, meaning they appear to be imported cases.
This round of infections is caused by Delta variant. The viral RNA loads are high in the respiratory tract samples of some cases, which indicates a high expelling of virus and stronger infectivity, as well as higher risk of secondary transmission in the exposed population.
And China, meanwhile, has accumulated a little under 96,800 cases as of noon Korea time, according to data by Worldometers. And as of Sunday, local authorities said around 75.6% of China's population has been completely vaccinated.
Right, well, that is also good to know. Meanwhile, over in the UK, so I understand it's become much easier to get into the country from abroad.
Right, Sunny, easier and much cheaper as well. Since Sunday, fully vaccinated travelers arriving from a list of non-red countries can now enter England with a more rapid lateral flow test instead of a PCR test to verify their negativity for COVID-19. Wales will follow suit in a week. Scotland and Northern Ireland are planning to do the same move as well. Now, while this latest relaxation is aimed at boosting Britain's travel industry, some health experts are calling on a stronger antivirus measure ahead of the Christmas season. A leaked government document suggests the immediate adoption of a Plan B in containment rules, which may include mask mandates as well as the introduction of vaccine passports. But lately, government officials have said that for now, they are ruling out this Plan B.
I see. Finally, so over in the U.S., I understand authorities there are poised to offer COVID-19 vaccines to children as young as 5.
Right, Sunny, that possibility has been raised on Sunday by the U.S. top infectious disease expert Anthony Fauci, who said COVID-19 vaccines for kids aged 5 to 11 are expected to be ready for use in the first half of November, which would translate into young children being fully vaccinated by the end of this year. The U.S. FDA on Friday released an assessment of Pfizer data, which is seeking emergency authorization of a lower dose vaccine for this young age group. And an advisory panel is expected to deliberate on this matter on Tuesday. And those are the international updates that I have for now.
Right, but stay with us, so of course. Now, so despite the drop in the daily tally in recent days, authorities are bracing for a potential spike in daily infections amid Halloween celebrations on the horizon. For more on that, I have our Min Jung to tell us more about these regulations, that is, ahead of the Halloween holiday, which Soa mentioned quite a bit last week when we ended. But tell us a bit more.
Right. So, well, last Saturday and Sunday, we saw fewer number of infections because fewer tests were done over the weekend. But like what you said, what is concerning is what might happen this weekend. Authorities are worried young people will flock into the streets of Itaewon and Hongdae to celebrate Halloween. And there also appears to be a growing sense of complacency given the imminent start of Korea's transition back to normality. And to prevent another possible uptick, the government is planning to conduct thorough inspections from Wednesday to next Tuesday. This will be done during the night, and bars and entertainment venues in Seoul will be targeted.
I see. Right. Meanwhile, so on the vaccination front, I understand we have the booster shots in full gear right now in the country. Tell us more.
Right, in full gear, and starting this Monday, there are more people subject to this booster shot campaign. So this is in line with the booster shot campaign for elderly citizens aged 60 and above. And starting this Monday, it's going to be seniors aged 75 and above, as well as people working at nursing facilities such as nursing homes and nursing hospitals who will start to receive those additional COVID-19 doses. And that's as most of these people have been completed their 2 doses 6 months ago, and that's why they are receiving those third shots. This campaign has started earlier this month on the 12th with those working at COVID-19 related facilities, so those medical workers who have been battling the virus at the forefront. And as of 12 a.m. this Monday, we've got 25,196 booster shots so far administered here in Korea.
Right, and our booster shot campaign is using the Pfizer vaccine at the moment.
At the moment, yes, but later on we are also expecting other shots as well, and we will also have to see what will happen with those people who got their Janssen single doses and which additional shots they will get.
Right. All right, so thank you for that. I'll see you back on Tuesday, and Min Jung, I'll see you on Tuesday as well.
Thank you.
President Moon Jae-in has vowed to work until the last day of his term to help Koreans get their lives back on track. Now, during his final budget speech at the National Assembly earlier on this Monday, he highlighted the need to maintain an expansionary fiscal stance with next year's proposed budget at a record $510 billion US. President Moon also said the country's transition to normal may begin in November, with more than 70% of the population now fully vaccinated. He added that basic prevention guidelines like the wearing of face masks will remain in place, while restrictions will be lifted for hard-hit businesses. The president also renewed his pledge to push forward with carbon neutrality and the Korean New Deal and support next-generation industries to ensure the nation's future. Shipments of goods into and out of Korea have rose, that is, by 8.6% on year in the third quarter. Seoul's Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries is linking the rise to strong overseas demand for local automobiles and petrochemicals. Also, cargo processed at South Korean seaports grew by 8.1% during the third quarter. The country handled over 393 million tons of cargo during the July to September period, up from 363 million a year earlier. Pundits say this reality comes on the back of gradual global recovery from the pandemic. Meanwhile, China is seeking to address a severe power shortage by boosting imports from neighboring countries, including North Korea. Our Shin Yin reports.
China is facing the worst power shortage in 10 years. Local media has reported that China has increased electricity imports from countries like Myanmar and North Korea. According to the South China Morning Post, customs data showed that China's electricity imports from North Korea jumped by 62% in September compared with the same period last year. It also jumped by 37% on year to 291 gigawatt hours in the first 3 quarters of 2021, meaning China had spent more than $11 million on electricity imports from North Korea. It also increased its imports from Myanmar by 44% in the first 3 quarters of this year, compared to the same period in 2020. Though this was a big jump from a year ago, local media outlets pointed out this wasn't enough to solve China's power shortage issue. China has been relying on coal for more than 60% of its power generation. But supply hasn't been enough to keep up with growing electricity consumption ever since the country's economy bounced back during the latter half of last year. While some local governments decided to temporarily stop factories from operating, authorities have been calling for more efforts, especially as the winter season approaches, which will inevitably lead to a higher demand for electricity to power heating devices. 신윤, Arirang News.
And South Korea is joining the global commitment to cut methane emissions by signing up onto the Global Methane Pledge. According to the Trade Ministry on Monday, the US and EU-led initiative aims to cut global methane emissions by at least 30% in the coming decade. South Korea plans to cut its emissions by the same amount. Methane is one of the 6 greenhouse gases designated by the Kyoto Protocol and is responsible for about a third of all global warming. In 2018, South Korea emitted some 28 million tons of methane, mainly from agriculture, waste and energy sectors. The country aims to cut that amount to 19.7 million tons. A large fleet of Chinese and Russian warships have conducted their first joint patrol, that is, in the Pacific Ocean, sailing through Japan's Osumi Strait. Kim Yo-sun has more on what Japanese authorities have described as unusual activities.
Boasting of close bilateral ties amid the prolonged escalation of tension between Washington and Beijing, Russia and China reportedly staged naval cooperation drills earlier this month, traversing the Pacific Ocean and East China Sea. According to Japan's Kyodo News Agency Sunday, 10 vessels from China and Russia sailed through the Osumi Strait off Japan's southwestern prefecture of Kagoshima. It added this was the first time that Tokyo's defense ministry confirmed a flotilla of Chinese and Russian vessels passing through the strait, which is regarded as international waters. This means foreign ships are allowed to navigate, but Tokyo said it will continue to monitor the two navies, describing the maneuvers as, quote, unusual. The warships are believed to have taken part in a joint naval drill in the area in mid-October. Over the weekend, Russia's defense ministry said the patrols were aimed at maintaining regional peace and stability. On Sunday, China's defense ministry said they were aimed at further enhancing the China-Russia comprehensive strategic partnership in the new era and to jointly maintain international and regional strategic stability. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
And on this Monday here in Korea, we celebrate the 22nd anniversary of Dokdo Day, a day to commemorate the island's symbol of sovereignty and more. Our Lee Kyung-eun walks us through the meaning of this particular day.
In the far east of South Korea is Dokdo Island, the first place in the nation to greet the sunrise. And October 25th has been designated as a special day to celebrate the island, which is a symbol of Korean independence and sovereignty. It is because on this day back in 1900, Korea first declared Dokdo as its territory. Emperor Gojong of the Korean Empire made a statement against Japan, which was attempting to dispossess the Korean peninsula of its properties ahead of its invasion. 100 years later, a private organization, the Party for Dokdo Protection, and other civic groups designated the day as Dokdo Day. The claim is based upon a mountain of evidence that Dokdo is indisputably Korean territory. One of the oldest pieces of proof is found in an early government document from the Joseon era. In the geography section of the Annals of King Sejong, published in 1454, it is recorded that both Ulleungdo and Dokdo belong to Gangwon-do province. It also specifically notes that Dokdo and Ulleungdo are not located far apart from each other, so Dokdo is visible from Ulleungdo on a clear day. Dokdo, in fact, is the only island that is visible from Ulleungdo with bare eyes. In the meantime, Japan had made several attempts to falsely claim ownership of what it calls Takeshima with a regional notice in 1905 announcing the incorporation of Dokdo into its territory. But as Korea had firmly established evidence of its territorial sovereignty over Dokdo, the notice not only infringed on Korea's rights, but also lacked legal force under international law. Most importantly, in 1951, following the end of World War II, Japan signed the Treaty of Peace, which clearly states that it recognizes the independence of Korea and renounces all rights, titles, and claims to Korea, with Dokdo, of course, included in the territory. 이경은, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. A magnitude 6.5 earthquake slammed northeastern Taiwan on Sunday, with residents reporting violent shaking in the capital Taipei. The earthquake hit the northeastern Yilan County at just past 1 p.m. at a depth of 67 kilometers. The main quake was also followed by a 5.4 magnitude aftershock as Taipei's metro system was temporarily shut down as a precaution before services resumed less than an hour later. Authorities say no widespread damage is expected as the quake was not a shallow one. The island's Emergency Operations Center did report one injury, a woman who was hit by falling rocks. Taiwan does regularly report earthquakes as it lies near the junction of two tectonic plates. While earthquakes of this magnitude can prove to be deadly, it largely depends on where the quake strikes and at what depth. In September 1999, a 7.6 magnitude earthquake killed roughly 2,400 people in Taiwan, while a 6.2 magnitude earthquake in December 2020 resulted in no major damage or injuries. Gunmen attacked a jail in Nigeria's Oyo State on Friday, freeing over 800 inmates by force. The latest incident marks the third such major attack this year. The country's prison service says the attackers were heavily armed. After an exchange of gunfire with prison officers, they gained entry into the prison yard by blasting through the walls with dynamite. Many of the inmates have been recaptured, while authorities are still on the hunt for those that managed to escape the prison. The latest jail attack in Oyo follows similar attacks in Imo State in April, where more than 1,800 inmates were freed, while another 266 prisoners were forcibly released in Kogi State last month. Casino giant MGM Resorts on Saturday auctioned off 11 of its Picasso paintings and works by the Spanish artist in an effort to make its global art collection more diverse and inclusive.
As the name implies, each of these works are hitting the auction block from the renowned MGM Resorts Fine Art Collection, where they have remained for the last 20 years. The auction comes as MGM Resorts reshapes its public fine art portfolio, deepening its focus on diversity and inclusion.
The auction, which was hosted by Sotheby's and held at Bellagio Hotel in Las Vegas, fetched nearly $109 million, with the collection including one piece, which was sold for more than $40 million. Some of the 11 pieces that were auctioned off had been on display for years at the Picasso restaurant inside the Bellagio. The restaurant will continue to show an additional 12 Picasso works. The auction also marked the first ever marquee auction in North America outside Sotheby's signature New York auction venue. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Today, that is October 25th, marks Dokdo Day here in Korea, a day that commemorates the historical significance of this particular island. Now, for more on this special occasion, our Chun Song-cho is out on location. Song-cho, welcome.
Good afternoon, Sunny.
Now, Song-cho, I understand you are at a related exhibition.
Yes, I'm at the lobby of the Gyeonggi-do Assembly Building, where a special exhibition is taking place to celebrate today's Dokdo Day. So yes, Dokdo is a group of small islets in the East Sea. They are 215 kilometers east of the 215 kilometers off the east coast of the Korean Peninsula and 87.4 kilometers from Ulleungdo Island. So basically, they are the easternmost point of Korea. And if you've never heard of Dokdo before, then you may wonder what's so significant about these two big, gigantic rocks in the middle of the ocean that a special day had to be designated to remember them. Well, this small island grouping has been at the center of a diplomatic dispute between Korea and Japan that goes back more than 300 years, though it is historically, geographically, and by international law clear that Dokdo is South Korean territory. Most recently, the Japanese Olympic Committee marked Dokdo as Japanese territory on a map posted on the Tokyo Olympic website, fueling anger over here in South Korea. And that is why the central government as well as regional governments have been trying really hard to boost the public awareness of this issue, and Gyeonggi-do is one of them. So the Gyeonggi-do provincial government has come up with a special exhibition this year to showcase Dokdo's beautiful landscapes and ecosystem. Well, the thing is, Dokdo is known for its abundance of nature. But due to erratic sea weather and preservation purposes, the islets can only be visited during the summer months. And even when weather permitting, tourists can explore a small section of the islets for an allotted 30 minutes. So this exhibition really allows people to access Dokdo's beauty without going through the trouble of physically being there. And over there, you see an array of paintings done by local young artists. And the motive of these paintings are all animals that call Dokdo home. So, for instance, here is Gangchi, which is a species of sea lions that used to live around Dokdo, but unfortunately they became extinct in the 1970s due to overhunting. And here you see seagulls, Gangchi again, shrimps. And then you see sapsalge over here, which is a shaggy dog breed that's indigenous to Korea. They're actually natural heritage species. And a couple of them were brought to Dokdo in 1998 to be kept by the Dokdo guards. And actually, currently, their 9th generation offsprings are happily living in Dokdo. Indeed, it is quite unfortunate that beneath of it all, the beautiful nature that Dokdo has to offer, deep scars continue to disfigure international relations between Korea and Japan. And I hope more of these public events will remind people of the cultural and historical value of Dokdo and help the two countries overcome historical grievances that have lingered for too long. This has been Chun Sung-cho reporting live from Gyeonggi-do Assembly, and back to Sunny in the studio.
All right, Sung-cho, thank you for that coverage. And to our viewers here and elsewhere, happy Dokdo Day. Living alone appears to be a growing trend in modern society. In fact, recent findings by authorities here show the proportion of registered single-person households in Korea has surpassed 40%. For more on this trend, I have Professor Hwang Myung-jin from Korea University, that is. Professor Hwang, it's been a while.
Thank you. Yeah.
I also have Professor Kim Se-won from Ewha Women's University. It's good to see you again, Professor Kim.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Professor Hwang, we'll start with you then. Let's begin with a few words on the reasons behind this reality and some of the current characteristics of single-person households here in the country.
Well, I just got a report yesterday, and it counts more than 40% out of the total household living alone. I could not really believe the numbers, so I checked, the data source, and the Minister of Internal Affairs and Security, Homeland Security, provided this number, which is quite I wouldn't say exaggeration, but much higher than the usual expert expected. According to Statistics Korea, which is the Central Statistics Bureau, they reported the number out of the 2020 census data. 30% are more accurate data, but still 40 doesn't matter. More people are becoming decide to live alone, and the number increased much faster than we anticipated.
I see. So it is a growing a concern for the country then.
Right. It's been a while. I've been studying this and then tracking the trend for the last 20 years, and then in the early of the 21st century, the number increased up to 20%, and it goes up and up. And mostly, traditionally, those who decide to live alone are elderly people, senior people who got bereavement, and then they have to live without any other choices. And the younger generation who go to school and they get a job near the metropolitan, the central area, which is Seoul and Gyeonggi area. But these days, people decide not to marry, and so therefore they live alone, and then marriage and marriage dissolution and divorces rate are increasingly higher. And of course, as we all know, that the price of housing and job
opportunity in the country is
exactly
very
that
tough.
Causes more of the problem worsen.
Right, and we'll get into that in a little while. Professor Kim, as Professor Hwang has mentioned, while those in their 70s account for the majority of single-person households, there has been a growing rise. Well, there has been a rise in the number of people in their 20s also choosing to live by themselves. How do you explain this growing trend among the young adults?
Well, we find almost same factors of fast rising single-person households in economics, like more remaining single, more divorces, and more separation by death of a married couple, and particularly governments and public companies' relocation out of Seoul. Out of these factors, I think more remaining single trend and relocation of government-related institutions out of Seoul metropolitan area are related to fast-rising single-person households in 20s. And more fundamental reasons behind this phenomenon, I think, is the young peoples in their 20s and early 30s, unstabilized job security and housing problems.
Right, which is encouraging them, that is, to live alone then. Professor Hwang, let's now turn our focus then to the social repercussions of the rise in single-person households.
Well, the reasons are very simple. Aging society, low fertility, therefore changes the population structure that causes, the number of the single household increases, and then the consequence will be the same. We are lacking of the labor shortage, the supplies, and social expenditure for elderly people and who are dependent and needy family will increase. And plus, the thing is that people become more individualistic. They better live alone, and the younger population, a growing number of people decide to live from their family house because they don't want to get interfere from their parents, and those things are all accumulated to choose to live alone. Number is growing, and only people who remain the same are the male in 40s. They still have to work to, provide bread for their family, but that number might decrease sooner or later, and then there causes a total dissolution of the family structure of our society. Most of the country, there is a prototype, a typical type of the predominant type of the family type, nuclear families. 4, 2 parents, 2 children becomes 2 parents, 1 child, and then 2 parents, no child, and it become more diverse and more, different ways. So that's what happens. So the thing is that we might not have our social the values
with the family. Family will be gone sooner or later. That's another thing.
I see. So the values will focus more on the individual then.
Right.
Professor Kim, what are the economic ramifications of the presence or greater presence of single-person households then?
Well, it looks that all business models and all industry structure should be reshuffled and reorganized thanks to the fast rising number of single-person households. Particularly in retail businesses and home appliances businesses, the impact will be really huge. If you take a look at Japanese experience, which experienced the fast rise of single-family household from early 2000, the sales of department stores and supermarkets are declining from early 2000. Instead, the sales of convenience stores are steadily increasing. So the size of the sales of the convenience store in Japan exceed that of the department stores and supermarkets as of now. And we have almost the same situation in Korea. We know that the expense of convenience stores chains, but department stores and supermarkets are having difficult times. So if companies and industries follows this new trend of this rise of single-person households quickly, they will have a great chance to boost up their business.
Right, I see. Well, elsewhere, Sweden accounts for the highest proportion of single-person households within the European Union. For more on this demographic reality there, I have Professor Martin Kolk at Stockholm University Demography Unit. Professor Kolk, welcome.
You.
Professor, do start by telling us a bit about the features of single households in Sweden and the reasons behind this trend there.
Traditionally, Swedish society has had a high share of single households because there's both a history in which children leave the parental home and live independently before forming a family, and also old people have been living alone and not with their adult children to a higher extent in Sweden than many other societies. So I think this explains why Sweden still has high shares of single households.
Right, and that reality of a high percentage of single-person households, has it not had severe or perhaps worrying social repercussions in Sweden?
I would not say so. So I think it's a part of the traditional family system, and as such, is working well. So if anything, the trend has been the last 20 years that more care for old people are arranged in people's homes instead of in institutionalized elder cares.
Professor Kolk, how are authorities in Sweden seeking to better accommodate this demographic portrait of single households and its implications in society?
Yes, as for strategies, so the most important social change that has taken place is this increased focus on providing old age care in people's homes and not in institutionalized care. And this is partly a way of saving money, but it's also based on stated demand or preferences of older people in Sweden. And to meet issues such as loneliness and similar among the older population, there's more of a focus on promoting social activities outside the home of older people.
What kind of social activities are we speaking about?
The different hobbies or places to have hobbies together, organized by the municipalities.
I see. Professor Kolk, and what has been the public response to such government efforts?
I think broadly speaking, there is quite wide support for the current way of arranging support for old people in Sweden.
Professor Kolk, another challenge for authorities here in Korea revolves around the falling birth rate. What can you share with us about efforts in Sweden with regard to this issue?
Yes, so across high-income countries, the extent to which the government like socialized the cost of having children, or put differently, how large extent of the cost of having a child that's born by the government as compared to the parents differs quite a lot across high-income countries. And in Sweden, there is a tradition that the government provides quite generous support for having children. This goes back to the 1940s. And perhaps the most important part of this is a generously subsidized daycare for children. And this is often not framed in the way of as a policy, so Swedish people can have more children, but by lessening the economic burden of children, it likely has that effect.
Right, and so such support by the government has kept the birth rate in Sweden quite high, would you say, Professor Kolk?
Relative to many other high-income countries, usually you find higher levels of childbearing in the Nordic countries. Yes.
I see. Are there any other support frameworks that authorities could prepare for in the case of a greater number of single households in the future, which is the growing challenge that is here in South Korea?
Yeah, so I think you must provide the right kind of infrastructure. So there must be housing that's suitable for single households. And also with the growing share of single households among the older population, to the extent they need care, I think you must organize care needs so they can be met in individuals' homes.
I see. All right, Professor Kolk, thank you very much for your thoughts and your time.
Thank you.
Right, then back here in the studio, Professor Huang, I'm going to ask you about efforts to arrange co-living living arrangements for those who choose to live alone, to ensure to prevent a sense of loneliness, as Professor Kolk had mentioned earlier. And with that regard then, what are some of the challenges that need to be tackled here in the country to allow for a productive, secure co-living arrangement on the local front?
Well, I have to redefine your question. And who defined this increasing number of the single households is problem? We. And those who live alone, they don't really care much about things, and they believe they live in quite a disastrous situation. The thing is low fertility and care for elderly people are related to the number of the single household. And then we have to separate the issues. Older people, we have to increase more of social service expenditure for elderly people, housing and health care and other kinds of a care system. And younger people, job opportunity, low cost of housing, affordable housing, and those things are more important. And for the rest of people, I think that's their individual life choices. And things that make the problem is usually raised by those who get the resources and powers. And then unless those who actually got influenced by this situation, speak the voices, there's nothing we can do about it. There's nothing we can worry about. But we kind of have a concern and, some giving attention to, what goes on in the future to this. I mean, that's my answer. Sorry about that.
No, it's perfectly fine. Professor Huang, you've pointed out that there are some people who actually choose to live alone and they're quite happy with it.
That's what I think.
Right.
Yeah.
And if that is the case, Professor Kim, for those who do choose to live alone and they're quite happy with it, what changes in policies then do you propose for authorities now to better accommodate single-person households?
Well, in the past, actually, in Greek and Roman periods, there used to be direct tax on unmarried male to promote marriage and population growth. But these days, in modern times, we don't have that kind of direct tax on unmarried people. But instead, we have lots of tax disadvantages on not married people. For example, for a taxpayer who has lots of family dependents, we provide quite a few different kinds of tax benefits, tax deductions. But unmarried people do not have that kind of opportunities to decrease their tax burden. But the problem is, under current tax system, for example, government does not understand how current tax system imposes indirect tax on unmarried people. So there should be more investigation from government to lessen the tax burden of the unmarried people and one-person households.
Right, of course. And Professor Huang, what social policies do you recommend then to better support single households?
Well, we have to think about what they want. Those who choose to live alone, they need freedom. And then what the parents and government and society at large, what have we done to giving them the full potential to enjoy their life, freedom? So having understanding, what they want is the first thing, and then we realize that giving them more chance to life choices for each other. Then we'd have to provide the public housing, private housing, or rent, or ownership with some of the banking, the mortgage debt. Well, giving them more choices better than nicely designed but without any choices selection. Like a housing, you have to live in very remote areas and nicely, building without having any charges. That doesn't give any freedom for them. So let them decide. I'm talking about we have to listen to what market says about it, and then we just follow that. The government has to listen to the first younger generation voice, and then what market can do about it. So I think less government this time is the best government for this matter.
Right. Professor, what about for single-person households who do not choose to be single but are forced to be single because, as you mentioned, they don't have a job, they lack the money to have a proper shelter? How can we better support them socially?
They might have different, the difficulties and, life choices or the value system. I would say the young generation who do not have income sources and job security might want to live with those who are in the same situation. So, without the blood tie, people like to live together as a quasi-family member. And then the marriage license is very restrictive, the social regulation for the younger people, If they decide to live, cohabitate, and then let them do that. If they make a baby, and then let them grow their babies on their own way. Government has too much of restriction on what to do and how to live for the younger generation, compared to Western societies like Sweden.
Right, I see. Professor Kim, single households, another potential concern with that living trend perhaps is the population declining. Now, findings for last year show that our population marked its first ever annual decline by some 20,000. Could you share with us a bit more about the economic implications of this trend?
Well, it is true that rising number of a single-person household has a huge negative impact on the fertility rate and marriage. And therefore, in the end, as time goes by, it has another round of negative impact on total number of population. As you said, last year's Korean population has decreased by 33,000, which is first time in Korean history. That means the number of deaths became larger than that of the number of new births in Korea. So this declining population is one of the largest challenges to the future of Korean economy. And I have actually a slightly different view on rising number of single-person households because against Professor Huang, actually, because this is not 100%, I believe, determined by free will of young people. Instead, it is directly and indirectly affected by economic structure changes. So the way of making money and the way of enjoying living makes the number of single-person households increases seriously in Korea, I think.
Right. It is a deep-rooted phenomenon then. Professor Huang, what do you suggest then to address Korea's declining population?
For the last 20 years, the Blue House organized TF for low fertility and the aging society. The problem is that those things has to be separate. They happen to put together because the phenomena are not linked together. And they've been providing, the monies, expenditure, and providing the services like child care and many other things. They all failed. Those are good for the social welfare, the well-being of people. But in terms of the demographic changes, the population structure changes, it's got nothing to do with that. The policy is isolated with, the goals that we intend to get. The problem is, Dr. Sewon Kim is an economist, and I believe that he knows what he's talking about. But being economist, that's not his fault. I understand that. Our society is too much into the income, the growth and the economic development. It's been gone, in this area of post-modernist society, we have to think other things, social well-being, life meaning, all those things. People have different goals, and the group of people might have different ideas. Let them choose what they want, and the government do not direct them what to do. The thing is that, I'm going to quote my dear beloved genius Hans Rosling. He's also a Swedish physician, statistician, and demographer. He's quite important figure in the demography. He always said the world is much more hopeful and doing well than we are worried about. And each person lives thinking independently about their lives, about family, and about neighbors, and then we'll find a way how each of us enhanced our lives in a better way. First thing is empowering family, and then taking care of neighbors, who are poor, who are starving, and who got lost, and who got steal or stolen. Those things are what we have to do first, and the structural intervention might be less result for our society.
I see. All right, Professor Huang, thank you for those thoughts. Professor Kim, do you share those thoughts, or would you like to add a few words?
Of course. So I totally agree with Professor Huang's views on increasing single-person households and related social phenomena. Yes.
Right. All right, Professor Kim, as always, thank you very much for your thoughts. And again, Professor Huang, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Right, well, whether it's living alone or living together, observers, as Professor Huang says, believe that the focus should be living well. So do seek to prioritize your health amid efforts here to exit the pandemic. Thank you for watching.